All right, just a thing or two before we get started. I just now sent you an email, and many of the things that are in this email are from the reactjs.org website, the main website for React. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about state and life cycle, but there are some other things in here as well. And I was reading an article that referenced a couple things. So I wanted to talk about this, but I'm not going to do it right now, the React developer tools that are available for Chrome. But I just wanted to quickly mention these articles that are right here. I was reading an article last night on React, and this was, one of these, everything you should know from React, the basics you need to start. Well, I figured that'd be decent to at least show you. Our best practices for writing React components, all right? Well, mistakes you should avoid when using React. Now, some of the stuff that's going to be in there we haven't talked about yet. And I'm not going to lie to you, some of the stuff that's in there we're not even going to talk about. Because in 8 or 9 weeks, it's really impossible to take React that's like this big and give you that much. You're getting more like that much. All right? Okay. But I figured let's start off a little bit differently today. So rather than watching these tapes, all right, let's go in and actually create a couple things. See if we can create a couple things. How's that? So what I'd like you to do is to create a new folder on your desktop. And in fact, if you want, we might as well, because we're going to make 2 of them. So let's create 2 new folders on the desktop. All right. And I wrote some notes here for myself so I didn't screw up, hopefully. But the first one you can call all lowercase counter hyphen CBC, and that stands for counter, which we're going to build as a class-based component. So counter hyphen CBC, all in lowercase. Then make another one, another folder, all right, and call that counter hyphen FBC, because we're going to remake that then as a functional-based component, just so you can see the difference between the 2 of them. All right? Okay. Then with that said, go ahead and open up your, let's do the counter one, the class one rather first. So open up your folder for class-based. All right. It's empty. It should be. So right mouse click on it. Choose Git Bash here. And we're going to say npx space create hyphen react hyphen app dot. Now, if you just stop there for a second, I want you to know you literally can do this without creating the folder first. Then but if you do it like that, like if we had just done it from the desktop, it would work. Then you have to cd into the folder. Now we don't have to do that. Dot means we're already there, so we've already created the folder. It's no big thing one way or the other. All right? So this should create the beginning stuff that we need for React, so just hit enter. You already know this doesn't come up like that. So it might take anywhere from a half a minute to 2 or 3 minutes. All right? And I want to mention, too, that one of those articles that I referenced, I was reading it last night, it does a good job of talking about the life cycle, and that's what we're going to be going over today. That said, the article's a couple years old, so it was the life cycle for React 16 dot something plus. They're now in React 18 is coming up. So some of the stuff that's in there has either been dropped or have been added to, etc. Just so you know that, okay? And just so you know, the reason for doing this is I want you to be able to see the differences between writing basically the same routine or the same program twice. Once is class-based and once is function-based. Again, the talk around here is that what we're getting toward today is function-based. But there are still hundreds, if not thousands, if not more lines of class-based out there. So you're going to be working with both, and sometimes it's easier to use one as opposed to the other. All right, I'm just going to start mine up here with an npm start. And yours may still be running, yours may have already started, but either way it doesn't matter. Okay, because I've already got something running on port 3000, so let me go close all this stuff. So I guess I should have everything closed there. No, let's see. Well, for whatever reason, again, and I think it's because I probably didn't shut this down correctly. So, let's see, what do I have open here to lot? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to keep going. All right? I'm not going to be able to run mine because it says mine's already up and running. You should be able to run yours. You should have the little twirling React logo that's coming out on there right now. Okay? And that's all fine. So let's bring this folder up. Our counter CBC, let's bring that thing up. Open it with code, please. You already know this stuff. I'm not going to go through the components that are in here. We've talked about this stuff already. Let's go into source and let's open up our app.js file that's in here. All right, so go into source and open up the app.js file. What we're going to do very quickly here is we're going to go and we're going to convert virtually this entire thing, again, into a class-based component. Well, first off, just so you know, we don't need this. We're not going to have the spinning logo anymore, so we can get rid of that line. All right? Not that that's a big thing one way or the other. Secondly, let's just grab everything that's inside of the div and let's just remove it. That cut down what we have in here quite a bit. As you can see, it's down to about 10 lines now. Now let's take it and make it into a class-based component. All right? Well, how do we do that? You know this from watching the tapes, but the first thing we want to do is we want to change this to class. So instead of function app, we want class app. We immediately get an error because in here it's not supposed to have any parens. So we remove that and we'll say extends. Now, again, two things we can do right here. All right, we can come up here and we can say import, not impotty, import, and you can say it like this. This is the way that I do it, but I'm going to do it the other way because it's kind of the way the author did it, the person we're watching did it. So you can come in here and you can, oh my goodness, say component from React. And I do want you to understand that what's happening when you do that, if you look up on the screen here, is the system then is going, and it's going into node modules, and it's jumping in here, and if I go all the way down, eventually I'll find React. All right, and if I open this thing up, one of the things that's in there is that component. So we're bringing that into our program, for lack of better words. All right? Now, we can do it like that, or if we want to leave this component off, we can say, we're going to say extends component here, we can say react.component. Either way. We probably won't need React here, but I'm going to bring it in anyway. Oops. Okay, so I've got this. import component / React from React. No, what doesn't it like? Let's see. Fine. I'll just leave it like this. Fine. All right. So here we have to say extends component. All right. So now it isn't done yet, and there are still errors in here. That's okay. But the point is, we've gone through much of the work that we have to do in order to convert this from a functional-based component to a class-based component. Now, you may or may not remember, but every class-based component needs to have a method called render. All right? And now we can grab everything that's in this return right here, and we can copy it into here. And again, don't worry if we have any errors in here. We will fix all those in just a bit. All right? Now, move that over a little bit. But right now, I mean, it's not doing very much. You know that. But if you do come in here, and you just to make sure it's working, if you put an H1 in here, and you type in hello, just something like that. All right? Then you switch back to your local host that's on 3000. So you switch back to what's on the screen, and you may have to refresh. But hopefully you see an H1 that says hello. All right? Does everybody see that? All right. And that's fine, but that's not what we want. Okay? But for now, we'll just leave that in there. What we want is we want to create a very simple little counter, and that simple counter will have on it, basically when we do this one, it's going to just have, we're going to replace that H1 in just a bit, but it's going to have a number on it. And then underneath it, it's going to have a button that says increment. And every time you click the increment button, then that number will go up by 1. Does that make sense? It's real simple stuff. I get that. All right? So, if you're sure that your thing worked, we don't need that hello in there anymore. So I'm just going to remove that. But we need something in there because there's nothing being rendered right now. So let's create something that we can render. So what I'd like you to do, let me close this. All right, is inside of our source folder here, we're going to make another file. This file will be a component. We're just going to call it counter. We could call it anything we'd like. But I'm going to right mouse click on here, choose new file, and I'm going to call it counter.js. All right. Now, eventually we're going to want to fill this stuff up with information. Should make sense. And what we'll want to have happen is we'll want what's in here to basically render back in here. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So even though right now we don't have anything to put in there, we can still put in this. Okay. And you'll notice we have a semicolon here. You really don't need it. We have a semicolon here. You really don't need it. I don't know if, sometimes the system automatically puts in semicolons. Sometimes it leaves them out. I just find that it's more confusing. You should either have them in all the time or never have them in. So I'm just going to pull them out for right now. All right? And believe it or not, this file at least, not our counter file, but the app.js, I think it's done right now. So I am going to do a file save. I could close it, but just in case I need it, I'll leave it open. And I'm going to come over here to counter. All right. Now, again, we want to come in here, and just like before, we're going to import. But now what we want to import, again, is React, comma, component from React. Now, when I tried doing that in the other file, you maybe saw that it gave me an error. I don't know what I was doing wrong. It looked like it was fine, everything that I did. Probably in this one, if you'd switch back to this file for just a second, I don't think we're going to need component in here. We may or may not, but I'm just wondering if I put in here, comma, React if I'm going to get an error. Because I'm trying to figure out why I'm getting an error in there where I'm putting the same thing in here, except I'm changing the order, so I don't know why that would matter. But let's see if that does matter. Evidently it does. All right? And I think the reason that it does is because it's React component. So when I put component in there without React, it doesn't know what I'm talking about. All right. So I did add that. And I'm going to save it. And again, I'm going to jump back now into my counter. Okay. So we're in here. You notice, if you take a look, you can notice that it's all gray. All right. And the reason that it's all gray is because none of that's being used right now. All right. Well, again, we want to say, kind of do the same kind of thing we did before. We want to say class, counter, extends, component. All right. And when we're done, again, this is just something I want you to get used to. All right. I want you to say export, default, counter. Because, again, what that does is that allows us to export the file, so eventually we can go back into this one and we can also import it into here. All right? In fact, one of the things that you're going to watch today in one of the tapes is the guy is going to, towards the end, I guess it's the last one if we get that far today, but the last one that he'll talk about is the architecture for React. And what the gentleman who's doing these tapes, what he will mention in here is, ideally, you keep breaking this stuff up into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. All right? So again, we'll talk about that, just not right now. Okay. So that's fine. I'm in here. Now, you may or may not remember. I'm going to hit enter a couple times. You'll see why in a minute. But you remember that one thing that we have to put into any class file is a render method. You have to. If you don't, even if you don't render anything, you could render a div with nothing in it, I guess. I don't know why you would do that, but you could. But it needs this, okay? All right, now, don't type this in. But remember, if I do this right now, for example, if I come in here and say H1, and I'll say counter right here. And if I come in here and let's just say button, and we'll say increment, button, something like that. Again, I'm getting errors. I'm not sure why. I don't really care. Oh, I know why I'm getting them. That's what I want to show you. How many things can you return? Technically, one. So for the reason I'm getting the error is if I come in here and I do this, not a fib, but how about a div? You'll notice that as soon as I do that, how those errors go away. All right? So you can only return technically one thing at a time. And that one thing that you return can be inside of a div, meaning that it has multiple things. Now, we do want to put this in. So I'd like you to put in those lines. Make sure you've got lines 6 through 11 that I've shown you. Make sure you put those in right now. And when you get done, do another file save, please. We're not finished with this, but we're getting there. If you were to run your program now, you'd probably get an error if you tried to refresh it. And the reason that you'd get an error is we've got to jump back into our app.js. And now that we exported it from the file it was in, we can now import right here. So we're going to say import counter from /counter. Do you understand what we're doing there? Do you understand how we exported it from one file so we could import it into another file? Does that make sense to everyone? All right, because I'm going to have to take for granted next week as we actually start building, quote, real apps, unquote, that this stuff makes some sense to you. All right, and there's going to be times when something doesn't make sense, and I'm just going to count on you to tell me when that's the case. All right? So, if you save, and if you've saved the other one, if you go back, what it should happen on your screen is it should show the word counter and an H1 tag And probably underneath that, there should be a button if you switch back to your localhost 3000. All right? Questions?
I need an error. On my render, it says I need a return statement.
Yeah, React/require return.
On here, on which file?
On counter.js.
Oh, we are going to have to return. Yeah,
Okay.
you're right. Don't worry about it. That's fine. That's why I said right now I wish mine was up because it would be showing me the errors. So okay, we'll get it fixed. Don't worry about it. All right. Now you may or may not remember this from when we watched this. I think it was just yesterday. But we want to work with state. In other words, every time we click the button, it has to remember where it was so it can go on. Does that make sense? All right. We don't want it to go back to 0 or to 1 every time because that wouldn't really be a counter then. All right. So in order to add state to a class, we need to create a constructor. So that's what we're going to do now. And when you create a constructor, the first thing you always put into the constructor is super, just like that. And again, what that does is that this right here, this line that you see in blue, that calls the constructor of this. Now, the way that the tapes that we're watching, the way that person, that Bob Zerall, who's doing the tapes, it allows us to go in there and get goodies. Well, that's fine if you want to say that. But the idea is there's some functionality that's built into component that now we're able to use because we told it basically to do the initialization that it had to do through component. All right? So that's the first thing. All right. After this call to super, we want to work with state in this program. So we do this. We say this dot state equals, and even though we only want to give it one thing in here, it is totally possible and plausible we could want to give it many things. For instance, one of the things that we'll talk about, or we'll look at later when we look at these tapes, is he starts talking about forms today. And as you'd guess, with a form, you might have multiple things that you want to send back and forth. All right? We only have one. So technically, don't type this in. We could put in this. We could put it in like this and just say count 0. And it would work just fine. The program was going to work just fine like that. But almost always you see it done like this. So this is what I'd like you to do. Is like that. So, in other words, what we're saying is we are telling React that we want React to make sure that it keeps track of whatever that count is. All right? Okay. Now, when we go in and we look at this, okay, I think that the reason it wasn't working, and I'm going to ask you to put this in and tell me if it fixes the problem that you had, is I think in render right here, I think if we just come in and right here, we put return, and you put a left paren in, don't worry, that error is going to go away in 10 seconds, and now you put the right oh, geez Louise. And now you put the right paren in, like that. I think your errors will go away, and I think if you save that and you go back to your local host 3000, I think it'll be running. It should have the word counter, and underneath it should have a button. Is that correct? You see it on yours. Is that correct on yours, Aaron? Christopher? Okay. All right. So what we're telling it to do then right here is we are telling it that what we want it to do is to maintain the state of this count. And in just a minute, we're going to have to do something with it. Well, right now, what we want to have happen, I think you'd all agree, is when you click the button, we want that to increment. And we don't want it to say counter. We're going to want it to have the actual number in there. Does that all make sense? All right. So what we're going to do is, and the order in which you do this is going to be up to you, but I'm just going to show you the order that I'm going to do it in here. I'm going to come right in here. Let me close this. So I got a little bit more room. And I'm going to say here, on click equals. Oops, and you got to spell click right. On click equals. So don't worry, that error is going to go away literally in a matter of seconds. All right? But what I wanted to do is I'm going to want to write a method that's going to handle that button click. Does that make sense? All right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tell it inside of here, I'm going to say on click equals this dot handle click. And you can see the error went away. Now don't run it because we don't have a handle click method. So if you did right now, you'd get an error. All right, because you'd be running a method that does not exist. So we're going to write that method right now. All right? Now, typically the constructor is what you have on the top, and the render is what you have on the bottom. Did you hear that? So we're going to put it right in between these two. All right? So I'm going to come in here. And I'm going to basically write it right now. So I'm going to say handle click. Notice the IntelliSense kicked in right away. Equals, and you can write it as a regular function or as an arrow function. Let's write it as an arrow function because we've been working with those. All right. So what do we want to have happen right here? Well, you would think, and this is what he talked about yesterday, all right? What is important is, let's suppose that I had a form, and I was going to send it out to the internet. Let's just say it had 10 fields in it, okay? And let's say that I screwed up. And one field that was mandatory, I didn't put in. But I sent it out anyway. You've heard this kind of thing before, that if I didn't do any validation, it would send it out to a server. The server would give me a message back that that field is required and I didn't put it in. And I'd have to do it all over again. And typically what would happen, it depends, is it may have saved all those, what I put in all those fields, or it may not have. All right? But let's say that it did. You can kind of look at it that my state is about to change because I'm about to put in the thing that was required that I didn't put in. But previously, it was wrong because I was missing something. So what I'm telling you is the way that this stuff works is, as far as React is concerned, the error that I would have had, the original one that I would have had is called previous state, and this is state. So what I'm working on now. And what I'm getting to is this. Don't do this. All right, don't put in what I'm about to put in because I'm going to remove it. You might think, well, there's count, and every time I click the button, I want count. I want you to add 1 to it. That's not the way that you create, that you work with state. Right? You don't do it like that. And it looks almost funky. It almost looks like, well, what you're doing is almost the same thing, but it's not. We want to make a call to what's called set state. So we say this dot set state, and again we will put in another arrow. I think it's not an arrow function here. So this dot set state, like that, okay. And we've got a paren here, and now we'll end the paren. And I want to make sure that after this handle click, I'm again, okay, that looks good right now. All right. So what we want to do simply is we want to say, okay, count. I want this dot state dot count, which means what it currently is plus 1. That's how you do that. All right? So backing up and looking at the entire thing then. We came in, we imported React and React component from React. We changed this into a class-based component. So it's class followed by the name of the component, which should be the same name as the file name, and they should be uppercase because components are supposed to be in uppercase. We should extend component, and the first thing we did was we created the constructor. When we created the constructor, we have to first call super. Then we had to let the system know what information are we saving here. So think about it this way, because this is something that we did back in I believe at least, in AWD 1000. Let's say that we were creating one of those BMI programs. And what did we basically put in? We inputted a height, we inputted a weight, right? So that's the kind of things that you would save in state, right? The only one we care about now is count. So we're telling it right here that our state is going to hold a variable named count, and it's going to have at least an initial value of 0. Does that all make sense? All right. Then when we come down here, let's skip the handle click for just a second. What we want to return when we get done, well, it's not really a form, but what is it? Right now it's just an H1 with the word counter on it and a button. But we're telling it when we click the button, we want it to call a routine called handle click. All right. This is just the text that's on the button. But every time you click it, we want you to call handle click. So what does that do? This is going to reset the state. And it's going to say, grab the current state and add 1 to it. All right? And you might say, well, yeah, okay, I get all that. Okay, good. If you do, that's great. All right? And there should only be one more thing we have to do in here, and that's this. We don't want the word counter in there, because right now it's not changing at all when the program's running. So we want curly braces, and we want to put count in there. All right, so put that in and save. Then go back to your local host, and you may have to refresh. Go back to your local host 3000. All right. Did it work? Okay. Did yours work?
No.
Okay, because you might be getting the same error. So I could have left something off. I would never try to, but it's possible that I did. That's why I wish.
It says count is not defined.
Yeah.
Okay. And what line is it giving it the error on?
20.
Okay.
The H1.
Okay. Trying to read my own stuff here, so hold on just a second, because I wrote it and it ran just fine.
Does it need a dollar sign?
No, it does not. So what happens if we put in here this dot count? I don't know if that's going to fix it or not. It might not do it. Flaming thing.
Oh, it did something.
Well, it went away now.
Nothing's- it
Okay.
shows the
Okay.
button.
Okay. And I'll tell you what. I'll go back, and what I'm going to do after we take our break is I'm going to reboot so that that message goes away. All right? Okay. That said then, because we're going to fix it, I'm not worried about it in the least. All right? Let's go build the other one. So make sure you've saved everything. So do a file, save if you haven't done so. And then let's close this. All right? Now you'll probably have to come in here and close it here as well. So if you've got it running on localhost, what you really should do is not just close that thing, because that's what I've been doing, and that's why I think you get that error. You should go down there and type in the word exit, and that should actually get you out. If it's still running, you might have to do a Control-C to stop the run. All right? Okay, and then that should get you out. All right. Okay, let's go back to the other one. Let's see if we can build the other one, then we'll take a break and I'll attempt to go and fix everything that's wrong. All right, so we're going to go to our counter-based one that's right here. That one right now is empty, I think you'd agree. So open up that folder. We're going to run through the same kind of thing. So in other words, right mouse click on that folder, go to Git Bash here. Just like we did before, we're going to type in npx create react app with a dot. And hit enter. And again, it'll probably take just about as long as the last one did. Oh, I think I know what the problem was with the other one. Okay. Remember I told you to put this dot count? It should have been this dot state dot count. Because it's part of state, so we had to mention that. That's fine. We'll go back to that. Don't worry about it. I want to get this one, hopefully, up and running. We'll go back and look at the other one then, and then we'll take a break. There's not much of the code that's in here is going to be the same. Some of it, of course, is going to be different because the way that the stuff is handled is different. All right. So this will be, hopefully, our function-based component one. All right? And again, yours might take more time than mine. I'm not worried about it. We're not really in any kind of hurry in here. Okay? I'm not even going to run this because, again, you saw the problem I had before when I did the npm start. You may end up with the same problem. Now, it does ask if you want to, sometimes it'll ask you, it'll say you've already got something running on port 3000, do you want to choose another one? I haven't tried doing that, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't. I don't understand why React would only work on one port. That doesn't make any sense. Once it comes up and you get your happy hacking method, happy hacking message, you're ready. So you can just clear the screen, and then let's open up the counter-fbc folder. Let's open that thing up inside of code, please. Visual Studio Code. Okay? All right. So again, I'm going to right mouse click on this one. You can leave the other one open. You can have 2 instances of code open. It won't hurt anything. So we now have this. All right. So I now have this. I'm again going to go over to source, and I'm again going to open up app.js. All right. Now, we want this to be a function-based component, and it already is. But the only thing is, I don't want any of this garbage that's in here. So I'm going to get rid of everything again, everything in between the divs. So it looks just like that. Don't worry, if you do something like that and you get an error, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt anything. All right. And also, I don't need the logo, so I'm going to get rid of that as well. Okay? All right. I'm going to leave off, and if it gives an error, then if we have to import React, etc., fine, but I don't know if we even do need that. So we're going to come in here, and in just a minute, like we just did, we're going to create a component, but it's going to be a functional component called counter. So in here, the only thing we're going to want to put in is counter, like that. Now, don't run it because that doesn't exist, so you get an error right now. That makes sense to everybody? All right. And again, we may need to put another import in here. This import, does everybody get this? This import is bringing in, where is it? That file right there. All right? Because there is a little bit of predefined CSS that's in there. You can go in and add your own to that file. I've done it before. It doesn't hurt anything to do that. All right. But I'm just going to do a file save. And now, again, inside of source here, so inside of right here, I'm again going to right mouse click. I'm again going to choose new file. And I'm again going to call it counter.js. All right. And I'm going to start by doing the import of React, comma, and then component. Now notice I've got here, I have just COMP. There are, oh, I guess it didn't work. Supposedly there are some tricks where, in fact, you don't even need to put this in. So in other words, if I do this, just watch if you would. See if I can get it to work. So if I come in here and I say function, and this one is called counter, and I put in fact, if I just do it like that, counter, paren, extends, okay. I guess there's supposed to be another thing for Emmet that you can add for React. I guess I thought I had it in there, but I don't, and that's okay. So again, I'm going to say extends component, okay, and that's how we're going to start. In fact, we don't need that, right? This is a class. This is a function, not a class. Sorry. Okay, so right there. Somebody tell me, what do we need to put in here? We do not need a constructor, but we do need to put in something in every function-based component. Do you remember what that is?
Is it super?
No, that's for class-based. We need to put in something down here. That is correct. We need to return something. Okay? Now, we're going to add more to this, of course, all right? But you need to put that in. All right. All right. Just because I think it might fail if we don't put in this, I'm going to again add import React, comma, component from React. Okay? And again, I'm getting that because we're not using it yet. We will in just a moment. And also, just get used right away. Just get used to doing your export, default, and then the name, counter. All right, we're going to have to bring counter into our app.js file in just a couple minutes. We won't worry about that right now. All right? Now, when we worked with a class-based component, in here, we put in the constructor, and we added this.state equals. Well, that works fine when you are working with class-based stuff. It doesn't work like that in function-based stuff. All right, you have to do it differently. You don't have any choice. I mean, that's just the way that it's set up, so to speak. All right. So what we're going to do, this thing right here, using component like this, in some books, it actually calls it a hook. And what that means is it allows you to hook into things so you can grab their information, for lack of better words. All right? So, in just a second, as soon as I can find it, because this mask is driving me nuts today. All right. Let's start creating, because we're going to do some of the same stuff we did before. In other words, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put in a div, and inside of that div, I'm going to put it in H1, and for now, again, we'll just, like we did before, we'll say counter, and again, I'm going to put in a button, and again, it's going to say increment. All right? Now, you don't have to run the program, you don't have to test it, you don't have to do anything yet because we're far from completing this. But we will complete it in just a bit, all right? Now, some of the stuff, like I mentioned, we're going to do very similarly to what we did before, all right? And what do I mean by that? Well, like in here, right for our button, just like we did before, we're going to say on click equals, just like we did before, all right? And we're going to say handle click, the same way that we did that before, all right? Now, unlike the way that we did it before, we're going to basically just create this as our own function in here. It's going to look very similar to what we just did, but not identical to what we just did. We're going to say const handle increment, handle click, right? We got to call it handle click. All right, so const handle click equal, and again, we'll make it an arrow function. And, well, let's say that all we want to do right here, let's just pretend for a second that all we want to do in here is we want to know if this works. That's what we want to do. All right? So, we come in here, and let's just put in a console.log right here. And we'll just say something. You can say whatever you'd like to say, but what I'm going to say here is handle click called. Again, you could put anything in the world that you wanted to put in there. All right, it really doesn't matter. We're going to get rid of that in a couple of minutes anyway. All right, now, in order to be able to use state in a functional-based component, you've got to add another one of these hooks up here. All right, and the other hook that you add is something that's called use state. Like that. All right, now it doesn't like that either, so let me see if I get rid of component here if it doesn't mind. So put it in like that. And the reason for that is what we're going to use kind of in place of the way we used this dot state before. All right? Did this, we did this. Now, what comes next in here, we're going to put in another line right here. And this looks really weird. All I can tell you is this is one of those times when I say, yeah, it looks really weird, and I'm going to explain what it is. It may or may not make sense, but it's one of those kind of necessary evils, for lack of better words. So I'm going to put this in here now, just a single line. It's going to say const, bracket, not brace, bracket, count, set count, equal, use state, 0. Just put that in, and then we'll go over everything that means in just a second. All right? First of all, this is telling us to take this variable called count right here, that's declaring it, and this is telling it to initialize it to 0. And this is saying that basically every time we call this, or we click it, you're supposed to be doing a set count, which is what we actually should be doing in here. In English, again, we're saying every time you click the button, we want that counter to go up by 1. In English, that's as simple as I can make it. And now, I'm not even going to do this because I don't have it available. So let's comment this line out, or you can remove it. It doesn't matter. All right, because it's only one more line we have to put in here. All right. So the line that we're going to put in here now is set count. Does that look familiar? Because that's it right here. Okay. So we're saying set count. And inside of here, we just say count plus 1. All right? Now, two more things we have to do, and ideally, at least, we're going to be able to test this, and ideally, it's going to run. All right? Now, in here, this is where you only put in the word count, right there, with a single curly. All right? So, if you've got all this in, let's just look at it again from the top. We're bringing in use state, because use state has, amongst other things in it, the set method. All right? We are telling it, with use state, we are telling it basically to take this count variable and initialize it to 0, and whenever we want to change it, we want to tell it to call set count, which is what's done in here. So this is saying, whenever we click the button, call this routine, and this routine should increment the count by 1. Now, if you run it right now, it's not going to work, because there's still one thing that we have to do. So I'm going to do a file here, save, and I'm going to jump back into app.js. All right? We may or may not need this, but I'm going to put in here import React from React, and that isn't the thing we need. We're still going to put in one more line of code. All right? And we're going to put in import counter from /counter, like that. All right? If you've got everything that's in there, do a save. Now, you may get the same error that I got that says you already have something running on port 3000. And if you do, you can either try to see if you can choose another port, or you might have to reboot. I don't know. You've got to do your npm start too, yeah. I can hear you clicking, Christopher.
Yeah.
Is it working?
Yep, it's going on.
Is yours working, Aaron? Good. Okay. So that is the function-based one. All right? Let's do one more thing before we take a break. Totally, what you've got running there, do your exit again to get out of that. Do a Control-C first to break out of, because it's running the server, and then type in exit. All right? Then you can close this one. You can just totally close it and go back to your counter CBC, your class-based one. All right? Go down. I'll do the same thing just because I want you to see it. All right? And with this one, in fact, I think I still have it open in here. There we go. In here, oh, this is the one that that's the to-do one. I thought, where is that all coming from? So, yep, that's it there. So let me open this up again. And open that up with code. And this file, make this line right here. So open up your counter.js file. This is in the counter CBC or class-based component one. Change it from this .count to this .state.count. Save it. All right. And go and open up your git bash here window. Okay. Do an npm start. If you still have localhost running from your last one, you might want to close that part of the browser window. Do an npm start, then go back again to your localhost, and now try to click it and see if once you do that, once it comes up, if it indeed works. Does yours work, Christopher? Does yours work, Aaron? Okay. So, although I didn't mean for it to be that hard, as I usually do, I screw up more than my share, but you now have built the same very simplistic app using both a class-based component and a functional-based component. And the idea behind that was to show you syntactically and otherwise the differences between the two. Does that make sense? Did yours work?
Actually, my number shows up as NAN or not a number for some reason. But could you scroll up in this?
Sure.
Please, I think I might have. Okay, that was the problem. I made something capital when it shouldn't have been.
You
There
said
we go.
yours works. Yours works. Now yours works.
Yep.
Okay. So that was simple. We're probably gonna have time, believe it or not, on Monday. We're probably gonna be able to go out and create maybe a couple of these. But the problem that we have, now, I went out and made the changes. The only changes that they have you make, just so you know, to the to-do list, all right, the only changes that they have you do to the to-do list, let's see, I'm gonna get rid of this, so let me exit this. I don't know if I'm still gonna get a message that it's running on 3000 or not, but let's see, let me open that with code, and let me also open this up in here. So hopefully I won't get an error, but you never know. Yeah, well, that's what's running. But what they have you change in this particular example, if I could bring it up. Let's see. Mine is still running. This life cycle. No, of course I don't have it running. But in the to-do list that we were creating, all right, in that to-do list, now they have you make some stylistic changes. So when you click on one of the to-do items that are in there, they get a line through it because they use text decoration strike through. They make it italic, and he changes the color to gray. All right? So, that's basically what the change is in there. If you're interested, I made the change in mine, and I've uploaded it to GitHub. So that's really just about the last one that they talk about in here. Now, I believe, because we're going to take a break in just a second, but I believe that last time we left off, where am I here? There we go. Right here. So on the React lifecycle methods. All right. So my hope is, what I'd like to do is we're going to start at 37 and see how far we can go. All right. I mean, if you like, well, no, we've had enough, then we'll just stop for the day. But the faster we get through this stuff, the faster we can start on our own stuff. I do want to go through this entire thing. All right, it is now 1:08. Let's take 15. In fact, let's just come back at 1:25, please.